Hello and welcome to episode 46 of Conf-T with your SE. I am your host, Brian Young. I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Tom Porto. How are you, sir?
I am very well, Brian. How are you?
Can't complain. Notice you're no longer building a snowman in the background. You're in your new office now.
I know I've stepped up in the world and no longer am, playing with dolls in between meetings. So it's good.
Are you though? Like I
No,
have a feeling.
I brought a couple down. I didn't want to feel left out.
I'm not surprised. And for those who have been keeping close tabs on us lately, you'll notice a familiar face, Mr. Keith Manville, who has joined us again. Oh, this is your third episode. You're right.
Third time here. Thanks for having me.
And second time within a month or two. Like this is it's impressive. Very cool. How you doing, Keith?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me today.
Of course. Now you just got I just saw an email come across my desk about you today.
Oh boy.
So yeah, depends on what email it was, right? So you just
your time is up. Your last day is next week.
Yeah, that's right. Email's not working for me anymore either. So something's up.
I was wondering why your video resolution just dropped there all of a sudden. It's like, yeah, we're pulling the plug. No, so Keith, you just got a new role. I heard.
I'm moving into a more security generalist space rather than focusing on one product.
Nice. Congratulations. Well deserved. And to to add to that, we have the one and only Mr. Mike McPhee, who has always been a security generalist, always moving up in the world, always doing something crazy. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing pretty well, thanks. Yeah, I'm excited to see Keith moving into that role. So
nice,
mostly because I get to bag him with all of my previous projects. Poor guy.
Poor guy, indeed. So, Mike, this is your second show. You were on pretty early. I think I don't know if it was a single
episode 5 or something.
Yeah, it was early on. So, and you've been busy, so we haven't been able to get you back on. So, I'll just blame you for that.
Busy or useless, one of the two. So,
hey, why not be both? Why not? So, this was actually Keith's idea. We wanted to do an episode on the Mitre Attack Framework, and I figured, you know what, that's a great topic to discuss because it's something that, while I'm sure I've danced around it enough times in my presentations with customers and talked about it briefly, giving the opportunity to deep dive into it, I think was a good idea. So let's just start, and I'll start with you, Keith, since this was your idea. We can kind of bounce around and, of course, interject as needed. Why don't we just start with, okay, what is the Mitre Attack Framework?
So let's start with thinking about attackers and kind of what they're doing. And well, first of all, Mitre is a nonprofit. It's a company, right? And they've created this archive or this catalog, as I think of it, of attacker behavior. And what's great about that is we can understand what our adversaries are doing, typically do. Of course, this evolves, and so it needs to be updated over time. But we can get a picture into the types of behaviors that these attackers are going to use against us. So I think that's where I would start with. What exactly is it? It's a catalog of behaviors. Specifically, it breaks it down to tactics, techniques, and procedures.
Very cool. Now you mentioned that it has to be ever evolving, right? So this is really kind of a 10,000 foot overview of kind of A to B, right? They don't get into specifics because those specifics always change, right?
So I think, what are we on, version 9 right now, Mike?
Yeah, just released version 9.
Just released version 9. So you'd be surprised, though. They do a great deal of work to actually get down to specifics. Again, down to the techniques, the specific techniques that attackers are using. How are they gaining access to your systems typically? And then what's great about that is we can, first of all, we can test against those types of techniques to understand if we are protected against something. And we can design our defenses around the Mitre Attack Framework as well.
Nice. So the Mitre is an organization, and what makes this up now? Is this just an organization, or is this like a coalition? Is this a voluntary thing, or is it, what is it? I got it. I hit one
No,
of those
I'm
things.
handing that one to Mike. That's my handoff.
Oh, Mike, that's you.
Dagger. Yeah.
Yes.
So
He's
Mitre is
handing
actually
stuff to me, so I can hand stuff to him now.
There we go. There you go. All right. Here's
Love
how
it.
it goes. But no, so yeah, I mean, Mitre's been actually doing a lot of, they're not for profit that's really structured around helping the U.S. government, whether it's on the defense side of things, energy, what have you, to figure things out, to solve problems. And so, they're made up of a few different chunks of the organization there. But one of the big focuses for them has been cybersecurity. So if you're familiar with the common vulnerabilities and exploits or enumerations or whatever you want to call it, CVEs, that whole database was actually stood up by Mitre. And they're really contracted by the government and its many entities to tackle certain problems. And so when the government's got a unique position in that a lot of times they're involved in some of these incident response events, whether it's through CISA or through US CERT or through, one of the agency's own incident response organizations. And Mitre has been called in to help with those over the years. They provide a great academic center of excellence when it comes to cybersecurity that provides a lot of analysts and a lot of horsepower that, for-profit companies wouldn't be motivated to share. And what Mitre did was they built this database, this common knowledge database out to actually help people make use of all the stuff that is public domain, all the different incident response reports and stuff, and bring it together so that we can all benefit from it. And so this is usually the domain of massive enterprises that have, security researchers, and SOCs and all that good stuff. But what they've done is really democratize cyber threat intelligence so that everybody can benefit from it. And so it's really they're out there kind of helping the U.S. government or NATO, allies champion the cause of, hey, let's, sharing is caring. Let's everybody get on the same page and understand what the adversaries are doing to us. And that's really how Att&ck was born. So.
Yeah, that has to be important, right? Because if there's just one organization out there that's holding all the secrets, or making other organizations pay to play, right? Hey, if you want to know how this works, you're going to have to pay us. They're not really much better than the attackers that are exploiting those customers financially or by other means either. So it kind of makes sense that it would be open knowledge and just like the CVEs, right? CVEs are publicly accessible, and they're out there to show the owners of those products as well as the consumers of those products. Hey, this is the threat level. This is the impact it has. You should really consider, taking care of this or patching it, removing it, whatever. So pretty cool stuff. Tom, I don't know if you had any questions or anything you wanted to add.
Yeah. So how does the Mitre Attack Framework differ or maybe overlap with like stuff like what Talos does, or like even like an MSI SAC? So how does, is there overlap? Is there collaboration there?
So, I mean, I'll take a stab at it, and Keith will be the smart guy who comes in and tells me where I'm wrong. But so Talos is full of awesome threat researchers. There are competing threat research organizations that do some tremendous work. But their primary duty, right, is to improve the value of Cisco or whoever they belong to, and to differentiate them, and to in the case of Talos, help make the detections we have in our products better. So they're doing things that are geared towards, okay, how can we not only be the thought leaders in cybersecurity, but make the detections that go inside our secure suite of products, whether it's endpoint, firewall, all that stuff, do their gig. What's different about this and kind of complementary here is that Mitre doesn't have a product that they sell like this. So they're taking stuff that is public domain, which is probably just the tip of the iceberg. The threat intelligence agencies and organizations like Talos or like the NSA or like Pan Unit 42 or any of those places, right? CrowdStrike, they're all going to have a much vaster number of data sources to pull from internally. But what's really cool about it is seeing these organizations, Talos included, starting to write their public facing stuff with ties and references to the Mitre Attack Framework, so that the parts that we are willing to share, the parts that aren't proprietary or aren't big differentiators, we're sharing so that we can help enhance and give back to that attack database. So I mean,
Any
there's
corrections,
overlap,
Keith?
but yeah.
No corrections. But what I would add is what's exciting to see is you mentioned Talos working with our internal product management teams to kind of take what Mitre has done and then use that in our products. So, for example, let's say secure endpoint detects a credential dumping attack or something like that. Well, where does that event fall on the Mitre Attack Framework? And what's great about that is we will actually call that out. We'll say, okay, that was tactic 003, and that was technique TA, et cetera, whatever the nomenclature may be. And so that way you could start to actually plot where the different events that are detected, plot those on the Mitre Attack Framework. And then what happens when you start to plot certain tactics? It may lead to a certain threat actor. So one thing that's pretty cool is starting to align the tactics and techniques that are detected in your environment to what's seen on the global threat landscape in terms of what's happening.
That's interesting. So we have the Mitre Attack Framework that is published, and that's a question. So is it published out? Is it it's just public domain? It's out there for people to see.
It's a whole suite of things, right? I mean, they release it. There's an interactive matrix that kind of acts as the home of it. So if you go to attack.mitre.org, you can actually see it there and see all the old versions, and they'll catalog things. You can go through and pick through whether you're looking for certain APTs and groups or software packages or different tactics and techniques that are in use, mitigations that you might be interested in. And you can go through there, but along with that, they've done a great job of making it super consumable. So yeah, you can go into that web page and do everything, but you can also leveraging APIs, you can query into that database and pull things out. You can build mappings. They've provided a ton of tools, and there's a whole ecosystem of open source tools built around mapping the detections you have versus the techniques you might see. And they've also got a ton of great literature there that isn't just informative and helping you grasp Mitre Attack, but it helps you learn what a threat researcher is doing to better understand the adversaries. And for me, that's been, I think, one of the most awesome and interesting parts of what Mitre's done with Attack and what all the contributors have done, is kind of getting some insight, not just into how the attackers' brains work, but the threat researchers going after them. Like, what is it they're looking for? What are the unique, nerd knobs and fingerprints that they're using to identify, oh, that's SVR, and, that's Deep Panda, and that's this and that's that. I mean, there's a whole lot of cool cloak and dagger stuff that goes into it that this really gives you a peek into. So I think that's what's really neat about it is you can, if you're into reading white papers, great. They've got conferences like Att&ck. Those are awesome too. There's a whole host of different open source projects you can use and that have been released to help you map, to help you test, to help you mock up what APTs are doing, and to help you actually vet the protections you've put in place, which I think is really awesome.
So that would really be one of the end goals, right? To just be able to look at what's happening and make sure that the protections that you have in place are actually looking for the right thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think they defined 4 major use cases.
Okay.
And it certainly started out as kind of a a threat research slant. It was very academic in its early stages for those who were looking for attribution and looking to better understand the adversaries. But then we started to see immediate gains with folks who were write detections. So that would be like product groups within Cisco or any of our competitors using the intel gained from that so that they could, better protect against each of those techniques. And then, we've seen it evolve from there to now, certainly red teams want to use it because if you want to deliver an accurate, awesome emulation of an adversary, you figure out who it is somebody really should be scared of, and you come in and you pretend to be them,
Right.
the actual definition of a red team. But I think one of the most interesting use cases, and one I'm certainly a big fan of, is something that kind of I think snuck in under the radar for a while, which is the actually evaluating gaps within your environment and using it to proactively close the gaps. So don't wait until a pen test gives you a big fat F or fails you, or you get red on a chart. Let's go through and actually use it to methodically go through, evaluate your threat picture, figure out where those holes are, and then close them, and know that you're not just closing them on paper, but have something to back it up. And I think that's the use case I think most useful to most of our customers, most of the people listening probably is that last use case.
Keith, anything to add?
That is a fantastic segue into purple teaming, in my opinion. So one of the this is news you can use. One of the events that's kind of being baked right now is a purple team exercise coordinated with the customer by Cisco. And what we do is we pick a tactic out of the Mitre Attack Framework, and then we select a couple techniques. And what we do is we emulate that tactic in a controlled environment with our security tools in place. So, for example, we would have secure endpoint installed on our target machine. We would follow the Mitre Attack Framework to emulate that tactic, and then we would see how it responds. And so, to Mike's point, this happened last week with a customer. We were able to identify a gap because the technique was successful. It was successful because they were in audit mode, so they weren't protecting.
Yep.
So that was a very easy fix to say we did detect the technique. However, it was able to proceed because we weren't stopping anything. You're in audit mode, right? Kind of just telling you what we're detecting. So I think using the Mitre Attack Framework to do just what Mike said, identify gaps. I think purple teaming is a fantastic way to do that because the hard work is already done for you of identifying what behaviors you need to run in your environment. And again, purple teaming, running it in a controlled lab type environment where you're not going to hurt anything if you dump LSAS credentials, for example. But you can try it, see what detections show up, and make those corrective actions as you go.
Nice. I think purple teaming is something. I think all of it is something more organizations are starting to do, starting to invest more resources into, whether that's hiring people, contractors, whatever. They're starting to realize that this is something that they need to look into. I mean, it's every day something on the news. I was watching the TV this morning, which I don't normally do, but I was waiting for a ride from the car dealership after I dropped off my car. And they were talking about the gas line that they had to shut down because of an attack, right? Every single vertical, every single organization, you're at risk. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. I've seen large organizations get hit. I've seen small ones get hit. And it's being able to identify those gaps, close them before someone that has, malintent is going to find them for you and let you know, right?
Yep, exactly.
It's a lot smaller price to pay if you can pay a consultant to find them or figure them out on your own. So interesting stuff.
I think that's one of the hardest parts of doing that is getting to that point where you have enough to work from, and I think that's what Mitre Attack does for us. Is it really opens that up, brings it to the masses, makes it a lot easier to consume because the expensive part's hiring all those threat researchers that can educate you on the bad guys, and now you have resources that can do that for you. So
Right. And that was what I was going to ask you is from the consumption side, right? Going to the Mitre Attack website, that really this is for really all the levels, right? You can dive in as deep as you really want to go, but if you're just getting started and want to learn the techniques, the things that you need to be focused on to study in, this is a good starting place as well, correct?
Yeah, and I think maybe backing up a little bit to help people understand, right, the various depths that they can pursue. I mean, um, when I first started looking into Mitre Attack as kind of this like little side hobby thing, I was overwhelmed because I went straight to techniques, and when you back up and you understand, tactics or the 12 or 14 now objectives, goals that somebody might have, and the techniques fit into those categories. And those are the ways you can achieve that goal, or those are actual technical implementations that allow them to get closer to that goal. That I think is where a lot of us are getting tripped up. That's where a lot of our customers maybe get overwhelmed is when they see that there's 400 plus techniques and sub techniques. Oh, holy cow, what do we do with that? But one of the things that I think has been really cool, on the Cisco side of things, is we've realized that pretty quick. And while we're certainly mapping to TTPs inside of our products, like Keith was talking about within secure endpoint, or if you look at our secure network or secure cloud analytics, those are both now mapping to TTPs. But as far as guidance to the customers, for the people who maybe don't want to dive down that deep, backing up to mitigations, which provide coverage of all those techniques, but in a much more consumable and mappable way, I think is a great compromise there. Because instead of worrying about 400 plus sub techniques, now you're worried about 41 or 44 different mitigations, and those mitigations, half of them are actually hygiene type of things. They're what you get out of the critical security controls from Center for Internet Security, or they're what you get out of just good best practice based implementation. And so what that leaves you with is, okay, where are these technical controls that help us achieve the last 20 or so mitigations? And when you look into those mitigations, that's one of the things that's awesome about how they've laid out Attack. You can dive into those mitigations and see all the techniques they cover
Mm,
and see all the ways that they help out. And so then the question, isn't, hey, how do we get full coverage of 400 plus techniques? It's how do we get good broad coverage and tune it against the threats we should see in our picture? And I think the most fun part of Attack, and probably the least relevant to get started, is looking into and geeking out on, oh, what's APT 28 doing? Or how does, Fin 4 do their thing? But, once you've gotten your head wrapped around what you have, then you start looking at, now, who do I care about? Who's my threat? And so
right.
pipeline companies, you can bet they're going to be looking at dark side and saying, that's in my threat picture now. And they're going to
Right.
be worried about how do those TTPs line up with the cyber kill chain, and how do we interrupt that in as many places as possible. But that's a lot easier to do when you understand what you already have, where that coverage is, and now you're just focused in on where the fuzz or the fog is within your coverage.
Yeah, SCADA has been a big thing, right? All those controls, because I know obviously the pipeline that we talked about, but there's been other things in the news, right? For there was a water treatment plant, I believe, that they made some adjustments and they were going to put way too much of this particular chemical into the drinking water, and it was bad hygiene. It was using third party remote tools, allowing contractors to come in. In fact, yeah, it was funny you mentioned the audit mode. I had a customer who we had sold, I'll call it what it was, AMP for endpoints, secure endpoint, right? We talked about that. You slapped me on the wrist for that one last time. He had installed it, and the whole reason was because they didn't, they obviously wanted to strengthen their security. And there was a developer on the team that had come in last minute, and he's like, this is a Linux system. It's secure. This is a proprietary ERP system. No one's going to hack it. Like, come on. Like, you don't need this. You're fine. This is a lot of money, which it wasn't, but this is a lot of money, and you don't need it. Well, we convinced them otherwise, and we put everything in place. But then I got the dreaded phone call. Bryan, we've been breached. We got ransomware. Where'd you get it? On that ERP server. that box, that developer said, no one would ever hit, no one would ever want it, no one would ever touch it, was the one that got infected. And it got infected because the endpoint solution was in audit mode. We figured that out pretty quickly. What was a huge, like, oh my God, you've got to be kidding me moment was when we found out that the reason, the point of entry, which we were able to figure out by going through the dashboard and looking at the entry point, seeing where everything came through, we found the username that was logged in, the time, everything. It was actually through the remote desktop connection that was set up for the parent company to be able to log in to make any changes they needed to for that particular software. And it was always on. The parent company got attacked. They got infected. And all those companies that they monitored and managed were the ones that ended up getting infected. And we've seen this time and time again, right? The Wendy's hack, I think Target was something with the HVAC contractors. It's always your weakest point of entry. And those are the places where the attackers are looking. And I assume that that the Mitre Attack Framework goes into that a bit too, right?
I don't think that they play a whole lot. And Keith, correct me if I'm wrong. They don't play favorites, and they certainly don't try to tell you, hey, this is where 90% of the threats come in, or this is attack vector, number 7 on the top 10 or anything like that. I'm sure there's interpretation of, the matrix that happens after the fact, and that people might go to cons and stuff and talk about it. But I think, to your point, right, the vectors can be whatever the bad guys need. And so, they don't want to downplay, well, this vector here, it's, bottom 3. You'll rarely see it. You may be in that segment or that vertical or that geography where, guess what? That's the bread and butter of your main adversary.
That's the number 1, yeah.
That's numero uno. And so I think they try very hard to stay away from the metrics. They do tell you what a lot of the data is that feeds into it. For years, for the first 7 versions, like the heavy focus was on EDR data and OS logs, syslog type stuff. They've broadened that quite a bit in the last 2 or 3 years so that they can include NDR and firewall and, other forms of telemetry, because we all realize that, hey, if they've compromised the endpoint, there's only so much you can rely on endpoint telemetry.
Right.
But that's why we're seeing the move towards XDR as an industry is we're starting to realize that you need multi-factor correlated detection, and you need it across, as many techniques are as applicable to you. So,
right.
Anything you've got is fair game. Anything within your environment's fair game, no matter how rare you think it is.
Yeah. No, that's 100%. Well, I just meant from a hygiene standpoint, right? Like making sure that vendors that need remote access, that it's under more control, do a multi-factor wherever you can, et cetera, et cetera. Leaving always on connections or something along those lines. In fact, we had another customer who they had a remote desktop. They used their domain controller. What's that?
RDP is the devil.
So. Yeah, but it was on their domain controller, and they were using RDP on it for terminal services.
Yeah,
and they got infected, and then they built the server the same way. And I was like, no, let's take these roles and separate them a little bit. If you need to have this for this, let's make sure that we put in the safeguards where we need to separate those roles so that if that box blows up, we can rebuild it easily. Blowing up and rebuilding a domain controller, that's a bit more of a heavy lift and not something you want to do on a regular basis. Tom, I'll open it up if you have any questions, anything you want to add there.
No, I wanted to point out that, Mike, I know you've done a couple of Cisco live sessions around Mitre Attack, correct?
I have. Yep.
I don't know if you want to give a little pitch to our listeners on that.
Yeah, I mean, it just started out as a curiosity. It probably still is a curiosity for me rather than an official gig. But, in 2019, I did a session that was called Bears, Dukes, Kittens, and Pandas. And it was kind of making fun of the fact that there was, all these funny names we're reading about in the news, right? And kind of just trying to demystify it a little bit. And so that, based on that session and some of the great feedback I got from folks, I decided with the new digital format to deliver different experience. And so the latest one, which the folks with Cisco Live Passes for the digital experience can see right now, and as of June, I think it's June 2nd or something like that, everybody can see, is one that's actually just about evaluating gaps within your architecture. So concentrating on that fourth use case. And I got a lot of help from Keith, kind of bouncing ideas off of him, because he's been seeing a lot of this, and he's been working hands on with it. And so the session focuses first on how do you quickly take that available matrix and see both your threats and your assumed detections. And then the second of the three stages of the presentations, how can you use some of the Cisco tools we sell to very quickly map alerts and alarms and events that you've detected to the TTPs that are in use. And so I go through AMP and or secure endpoint, secure cloud analytics, and I believe it's Orbital. Actually, I use Orbital Search, which is a great capability that comes along with the Secure Endpoints Advantage product.
Keith covered that a lot last time, and that blew me away. It's
phenomenal. I mean, you turn every endpoint into a searchable, queryable database that you can say, what did they do to you? It's like, you point here. Where did they hit you? And it was fantastic. And then the third phase, I actually was just having fun with in the presentation. Mitre, along with that, awesome spirit of, sharing is caring, provides a project called Caldera, which is actually an emulation platform. And what's really neat about Caldera is you can use it to red team yourself. Don't recommend anybody do that in production, but if you've got a representative lab, it's really interesting to have your tools, running in that sandbox environment, and then to use Mitre Caldera to come in and actually run a red team op against you. And it will go through, and you can model the adversaries any way you like. Maybe they're heavy on the lateral movement. Maybe they're more all about enumeration and they're going to sell your data later. Or maybe you've got a specific, bad guy that you're looking at, or bad actor that you're looking at emulating. You can go through and model that with all that TTPs from Mitre Attack. And it's got a plug-in module from Atomic Red Team, Red Canary open source effort, which is also really awesome, by the way. That helps you very quickly understand, okay, I'm really worried about, this particular APT. How are they going to attack me? Stage it, launch it against your environment. And you can even use it for purple team ops, in that you can integrate blue team tools to it and see how they go tit for tat. And actually, we ran this, did you see it? We ran that, did you see it? And it can very quickly help you close those gaps and tune your detections, and help you figure out where your blind spots are. So it was a fun experience. A little weird doing it digitally as opposed to running it in person, but very much looking forward to taking that one to one of the live Cisco Lives at some point, because I think it was a lot of fun on my end. We'll see what the viewers think, but yeah, it was good.
We have to check that out. I haven't got a chance to check out your session yet, but I'm intrigued. So Keith, how did it feel to have a lot of your work stolen by Mike and then used for a Cisco Live presentation?
I was just going to say it was phenomenal. I got to view the sessions, and I learned a ton. I haven't played much with Caldera, so it was really eye-opening there. But to the point we're just talking about, kind of backing in to Mitre Attack Framework, I think a cool use case, and I do this all the time, is we'll hear about something in the news. I think one of those we hear about all the time is threat actors using Cobalt Strike. And so I don't really need to know what Cobalt Strike is, but I can go to the Mitre Attack Framework, look in their software repository. Oh, I see what Cobalt Strike is now. More importantly, who's using it? Oh, APT29. Okay, what's that? APT29, Russian intelligence. Okay, and so you kind of can create that picture of your own, what's important to you in terms of a threat landscape, and then kind of get into the whole, let's emulate it. Let's close our gaps and see where we have gaps of detection and protection. So I think it's just a phenomenal tool to be able to just to learn more. And the fact that it's, like you said, Mike, sharing is caring, right? Being able to grow as a security analyst by using this tool, it's just been phenomenal. And so, yes, I will get him back for taking my stuff. I'm kidding. He didn't take any of my stuff. I don't have any stuff to take.
Just knowledge. Now, and don't be worried about calling out APT29 what it is. I don't think we have a lot of downloads in Russia, so if we lose that segment of the globe,
Oops.
I think it'll.
Oh, you didn't hear, Brian? We're number 1 over there now.
Actually, I think we did get up on the list in Ukraine, but I'm not going
Public
there.
knowledge.
Exactly. We're not selling any state secrets here. But no, I think that's eye opening. I know I'm going to be checking that out. Now, is Caldera, is it a VM? Is it software? Is it a cloud service? Like what is it exactly?
Yeah, it's just an open source. You get it off GitHub. You pull it down. You run it as a web service. Log into it, and you're given a portal. And there are organizations that use it at great scale. Obviously, labbing around and goofing off with it, like I was. I mean, it's very lightweight. But what it really does is it goes through and it provides you with a GUI, web portal that you can use to set up your test environment, understand, which agents you want deployed, and then decide what you want done with them. And it will completely automate the delivery of the attack from there. Nice. So it's, fairly light lift, and there's a whole lot of great resources on YouTube and, in the blogosphere there that really can help in getting your feet wet. And I should point out, there's, for every Mitre Caldera, there's another 30 or 40 awesome tools out there. And it really just comes down to, what your use case is, what you're comfortable with, and what you want to get out of it. Right. One of the other tools that I made use of on the first phase when we were talking about, Mitre provides you with what they call the Attack Navigator, which lets you very quickly build your own custom matrices. But if you're trying to manage, okay, well, here's what I'm scared of, and then compare it against here's what I think I can detect. There's actually an open source tool called Detect that allows you to, go in and define your different detections. It's got default settings for here's what I should see from Sysmon and Windows logs, and here's what a network intrusion detection system will show me, and here's what a DLP tool will show me, and here's what and you can layer those and then build your own page in the Attack Navigator. And then it's a simple mathematical operation in Navigator to say, take tab A, subtract tab B, tab C is my gaps. And you can go from there and do all kinds of fun things. And it's a great workspace for working with management or the rest of your team so that you can all have that common picture of, hey, what's going on? You can download it into Excel. With version 9, they've actually built a whole bunch of Excel integration type stuff so that it's now much more full featured. But the point is that they're trying very hard to make it so that anybody can use it in whatever way they can imagine, and that it's free and open so that you can take it and run with it. And so I know of colleagues who have customers that are doing amazing things with Mitre Attack and using it to drive their entire SOC approach and their incident response plans and everything. And it's phenomenal to see. And they use that as an important framework, just as if it was any of your more, procedural or governance type frameworks. Mitre Attack helps drive how things, are done within the organization. So it's pretty slick.
Nice. Tom, any other questions you had?
I don't. It's awesome stuff, guys.
Yeah, this is great, and I appreciate the coverage on this. I think this is one of the few episodes we've ever done where it's not just focused on something Cisco related, right? Obviously, there's some benefits that we can offer. There's some integration points, which of course any security company would be doing so and be taking advantage of the knowledge gained and shared by the Mitre Attack framework. So it's cool that we were able to dive into this, and I appreciate both your time. I'll just bring it around for any final thoughts, closing thoughts here, closing arguments. Keith, I'll start with you, man, since this was your idea. If there was anything else that you wanted to cover, now's the chance.
Well, so this was my idea because Mitre, they were kind of in the news, I guess, 2 weeks ago or so. They also do evaluations, and so vendors can sign up to be part of that evaluation. So Cisco was, and we had our secure endpoint product as part of the evaluation. And it's great that we finished with this during the podcast because we've kind of explained what they did. They emulated two adversaries. They built up their environment and they ran these attacks using the Mitre Attack Framework to basically see how a vendor would react to those TTPs. Now they definitely do not provide like a ranking or a like a magic quadrant. That's not what they're trying to do. But it was fun to kind of dive deep into the results. They're there for everyone to see, and kind of find out where the product that you have in place, where how they do against those types of evaluations. So that's why I came to you with this, Bryan. That was fresh in my mind, and I thought it'd be great to get some information out about what Mitre Attack is, and then kind of tie it off with. You can check out how we did on the Mitre. It's actually Mitre Ingenuity is the spin-off from Mitre that does the evaluations.
Cool. We'll be sure to post links to that and everything we talked about. But that's great too, because we spent the first part of this episode just going over what it does and understanding the value, right? Because if you just told me, hey, you can go check out how we did on the Mitre Ingenuity, I'd be like, all right.
What
cool.
does that mean? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
No, those are some high numbers, I suppose. I guess that's good. Is high good or bad? I don't know. But no, I'm glad you mentioned it.
Yep.
Beautiful. I love it. Thank you, Keith, for that, and of course for all your input there. Really appreciate it.
Happy to be
Mike,
here.
I'll turn it to you. And any final thoughts, closing arguments?
Yeah, I would just encourage people to engage with it. I think this, we get lulled in this industry, especially in cybersecurity, into thinking that we've got these really boring frameworks over here and we've got these test results or quadrants or, lab, bake-offs over here, and that we're really just, innocent bystanders or kind of kept out of that. And I think what's really neat about Att&ck is that it's bringing those two things together and making us a key part of it. At the end of the day, this is about enablement. The nice thing about having something like that, that isn't pay to play or isn't closed off, is that everything's published and it's meant to educate you so that you can make your own decisions. They're not, as Keith mentioned, they're not putting rankings and cramming them down your throat. They're forcing you to determine what means most to me, like what helps here. And so I'm hoping that everybody here, even if you're not going to use these to actually actively evaluate your environments, use something like Mitre Attack and the resources built around it just to better understand the bad people out there, the bad actors. And if we all do that, we all understand, what it is they're after and what they're doing, even if it's just at a tactics level, what are they trying to accomplish? If we understand that, we'll all stand a better chance against this constant onslaught of front page headlines and really discouraging, cyber attacks here. So that's my big takeaway. It's fun, but it's also critically important that we all get on board with understanding the bad guys.
All I can picture right now, and I wish I could do it. I'm not muted.
There you go.
There you go. All I can picture right now, now that you say that, is just the star going across the screen. The more you know, right?
Right.
There you go. Knowledge is power, sharing is caring. Those are the two buzzwords of the or buzz phrases of the episode. But Mike, Keith, thank you again both for coming on. Always a pleasure to have you. Tom, thank you also. And thank you, listener, for listening to Conf Tea with your SE. Be sure to check out the show notes. We're going to put all the links to everything mentioned in there, as well as the social medias where you can follow us, follow Mike, follow Keith, bug them. Please definitely bug Mike, because I know how much he loves it. But thanks for listening, and stay safe out there, and don't forget to save that config.